Beyond the Check Service Industry podcast. I'm Reyshan Parker, and if you hadn't had a chance yet, please go watch my television series Beyond the Check now, streaming on Amazon Prime and Fox's Tubi TV. You got 2 seasons of me hanging out with some awesome chef owners, and they make awesome food that I get to eat. It's fantastic. Anyway, I have a fantastic guest today. She is Canada's baking sweetheart. She's an accomplished savory chef as well, and a positive common sense approach to the kitchen. She's become one of the country's most recognizable television chefs, appearing for 2 decades on the Food Network Canada with shows like Bake with Anna Olson, and now a series such as Great Chocolate Showdowns. She has a brand new book out. It's Anna Olson's Baking Wisdom. It is literally the Bible of baking. This thing is jam-packed with all the baking secrets you could possibly ever need. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Anna Olson. Hi, Anna.
Reyshan, hello. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thank you for sending me this amazing book. I'm trying to get my wife to work her way through it, so it should take, we should be together at least another 10 years, and I think maybe we can do it.
Maybe. Yeah, if you got to schedule in the bakes at least once a week then, and you should be fine.
Just once a week? I was hoping maybe every day. Oh, well.
Oh, yeah, with over 150 recipes. Well, you could go through it pretty quickly.
I like sweets. Probably more than I should. But anyway.
What are some of your favorites?
Just generally chocolate brownie.
You
can't go wrong with a chocolate brownie. And I saw your chocolate brownie cookies in here too. That was like first on my list to get made.
And there is a peanut butter and jam brownie recipe.
Oh, saw that too.
A bit over the top.
But good for breakfast.
Hey, it's the South. So I know, the sweet tooth at breakfast is a thing. I'm originally from the South, so I can say that.
Yeah, so you were born in Atlanta. How long did your family stay in Georgia before you moved?
Not too long. We moved from Atlanta to Toronto when I was 6. So I got a taste of the warmth. I have memories of living in Georgia, but I grew up. My impressive years were in Canada. Grade school, high school, university. But Then I went back to the States. That's where I actually went to cooking school. When I decided I wanted to be a chef, at the time I was working in banking. It was a second career choice for me. And So to find the program I wanted, I went back to the States. And then I worked for a little bit in the States before I came back to Canada. So I've been back and forth a few times.
Very cool. Yeah, I was going to ask, what was your inspiration? Why did you become a chef? How did you become a chef? Who was your inspiration to becoming a chef? And obviously, it wasn't Warren Buffett.
No, clearly. Oh, and that point in my life, it was so strange. So cooking and baking was such an inherent part of my life. And I think, especially for a lot of people who bake, there's a family influence. And for me, it was my grandmother. That was how she expressed her love. She would bake for you. And if you wanted to spend time in the kitchen or spend time with grandma, you had to be in the kitchen. And if you were in the kitchen with her, well, she was putting you to work. And so I was by her side growing up. And then because she baked out of a wish to share and for love, it was always that positive thing. So then that became my after school hobby. And for a lot of bakers, now everyone's watching on social media. You get this inspiration, and that's my Saturday mornings would be spent baking. And so it never occurred to me that it was a career. It was always just my happy place. And so I studied political science in university along with sociology, didn't know what to do with that. And so I went into banking by default. I didn't
it's
know
funny. What just a tiny letter difference made all the difference.
That middle N is the only difference there. I wish it was that easy that all I had to do was take out that middle N. But, I was surrounded by people who, would hungrily wait for the housing index number to be released on Wednesdays or the prime rate changes to be announced. And I was the one in the corner with my eyes oh my God, not connected with it. And I respected that they were loving what they did. And I thought, okay, well, how can I be that person? It's clearly not in this field. And I call it my muffin epiphany. I had a moment where this was the early 90s. And so interest rates were all over the place. I was in bonds and treasury bills tied to currency. Currency was all over the place. And I was up in the middle of the night stressing about things that were not a part of my engaged life. And I found myself in the kitchen making banana muffins, not because I wanted to eat them, but it was the one thing that was going to get my mind into a better place. And I looked down at the bowls and the muffins and thought, this is what makes me happy. And it was within 3 months. Quit, researched cooking schools. I found myself in the States. I went to culinary school. I went to Johnson & Wales University. And there used to be a campus in Charleston, South Carolina, not too far from you. But I went to the campus in Vail, Colorado, which was a fast track program. So it was a small group of us. We knew what we wanted to do, studied, got to work. And then I spent a little time. I worked in Texas and New Orleans before I made my way back up here to Canada.
Very nice. I bet all your friends really appreciated you in school.
Yeah, I was always the stress baker. So you could always tell when it was exam time or essays were due, because all of a sudden out would come the blueberry buckle loaf or the brownies or the chocolate chip cookies.
Like, there's a hard test coming because we have a lot of confections here.
We're a lot of cookies to get through.
Very cool. How was Vail? I lived in Colorado briefly as a child, and we've been back a couple times, but Vail is one of my favorite places. Did you?
It was an amazing place. So to do the fast track program, you do 12 months straight of schooling, and it's a combination of the cooking labs. It was a really smart program because you've been to Vail. It's a ski resort community. It's got its high season in winter, a modest summer season.
It's good hiking.
The hiking and the mountain biking was so big. But what we would do is the ski chalets that would do the commissaries during the winter time, that is where we took our labs in the summer when they weren't being used. And then we would do our classroom work, like food theory, business management, and such in the winter in the mornings, a couple days a week. And then we would work in the restaurants, do our active co-ops in the restaurants when they needed the help from sort of mid-level people like ourselves. And so it was a perfect balance. And then on the days we weren't in class, well, yes, I did ski a whole lot. Which
you probably didn't get out of there too much since you had a year straight of just perpetual knowledge.
But you know what? It was great. We would do... when you're normally going to university, you've got your classes, 15, 20 hours a week. Mm-hmm. This was Monday to Friday, 9 to 5. Mm-hmm. They would let us out early so we could still work in the restaurants in the evening if we wanted to. So I would work. It was just nonstop for a year. But that's what I was there to do. And you really took in a lot of knowledge. And at that point, though, I studied, they didn't offer a baking specific program. So I did general culinary arts, and then my baking interest came in gradually on the job. What was fascinating is Vail is at 8,000 feet above sea level. You go up to the top of the mountain, it's 10,000 feet above sea level. You learn about high altitude baking very, very quickly.
Because it's super different, right? Everything has, because it's a science. Baking is basically science. And if you mess up a little bit of it, you mess up the whole cake.
And I think that really was my initiation into the interest in what is behind baking. Baking was something I just took for granted and, follow the instructions, you should be okay. But you realize, no, there's a little more to it behind that. And that's where the beginning of collecting those bits of baking wisdom started for me, I think.
So what is an adjustment that we need to make at such a high altitude if, we're in Colorado and all of a sudden we want to make some cookies and we have this grandma's recipe that we've used for our whole lives. And for some reason, these aren't right.
And mostly what happens, things take longer to bake. And then what happens for the most part, cakes and breads especially will sink. And you think, well, why is that happening? You get a big hole in the bottom of your cake is concave. And the principle behind it is the higher altitude you get, higher up you get, the lower the air pressure. And so in terms of baking, what you have to think of is there's less resistance. So recipes developed at sea level rise up faster, but before those sea level recipes have a chance for those ingredients to bond, boom, there's just nothing to hold them up, so they sink. And so what you need to do are a few things. The two major things you do at a higher altitude is you increase your liquids so that the wetter a batter is, then you're allowing more time for those ingredients with less resistance to find where they belong in the picture of things. And you actually want to reduce your baking powder, baking soda, or yeast and then it's incremental. The higher up you get, the lower you increase it. So you don't get that initial rise. When it comes to high altitude baking, I just leave baking soda out of the picture because that starts reacting in the bowl the minute it's liquefied and in the presence of an acidity. Baking powder needs at least the heat along with that to activate. So you've got a little more time, but you buy yourself the time with the added liquid. And then the third thing you do is you increase your oven temperature start with like 10, 15 degrees, because then that's coaxing everything into place. Because it's basically trying to manage the recipe when it's out of your hands, and that's when it's in the oven. And so I think baking reveals trust issues. When you're cooking a pot of soup on the stove, you can go back to it and you can adjust it and you can tweak it, or a salad or anything on the grill, and you can kind of adjust it as you go along. But once you've created this batter or dough and you put it in the oven, the trust is gone. It's not up to you anymore. So you have to kind of come to terms with that when you're baking. You
gotta have faith in the baking, faith in the souffle.
Oh, yes. Do not fear the souffle. And don't look at it. Just let it be.
Trust the souffle. You have done your job. Allow it to do its.
Exactly.
Awesome. So you've done so much in your career now. I mean, how did you go from just, a student to falling in love with baking to ending up on the Cooking Network of Canada?
Well, that's a good question to ask, Reyshan. I think it was a lot of happy accidents. It was definitely not a straight line. And I would say even to this day, not a lot of it has been planned. It just saying yes to those opportunities when you either make them or find them, even when it's sometimes easiest to say no. So, I had to do my apprenticeship after school, work in a few restaurants, and that's where I found myself leaning towards baking. And I worked in a lot of restaurants that would have a pastry chef, but not a pastry team. So when the pastry chef needs to take a day off, I would always volunteer to be that person to
step in, and take care of the baking.
But I would be unattended. And so I would be given the book. Here are the recipes, the baker's recipes. Here's the list of things you have to do. And you basically can't go home until that list is completed. And so I had to figure out a lot on my own, or I would get notes back the next day, or the pastry chef would come find me and say, okay, these cakes got overbaked. These didn't come out right. These look just right. And we would walk through the why. So I was coming up with the whys along the way, kind of on my own through the process. I was also at the same time finding I was drawn to restaurants that like to focus on a local seasonal cuisine. And so as a young chef, and it's always interesting, it's something to get past.
So what year was this?
94, 95.
Yeah. I mean, we were still in the height of all franchises at the time. Like Applebee's and everything was still king.
And the plating style was center of the plate, make things as tall as you could. What can we stack on top of each other and make it impossible for the waiters to take to the table? That was the trend. Roasted peppers, portobello mushroom, buffalo mozzarella had just been discovered in North America. So, balsamic glaze on everything.
Sushi was on its way in. We're all questioning it.
Oh, I know. Yeah. I think to this day, I cannot. Roasted peppers are not my favorite because I think I hit my lifetime quota of making and peeling roasted peppers in the 90s. So yeah, moved past that. But it was fun. It was an exciting time to be a cook and to be a baker. And so I was working, I found myself in Niagara working at a restaurant. It was tied to a winery called Inn on the 20. And it was just starting out. And I loved the approach. And I fell upon the restaurant just on one of my visits home to see my family. And I ended up spending 10 years baking there. And so I was able to grow as the restaurant grew. So my early days as a baker, I was working in a little corner space, like honestly, one table. I probably had 5 feet by 4 feet to cook out of. And our rolling racks were in front of the electrical panel in the back of the kitchen. Probably not the safest. And I had one little deck oven. And then as the restaurant grew, and then they expanded and they opened an inn across the street. And then we opened a banquet facility. So my job, all of a sudden, then I got a proper bake shop and I had a staff. And we were doing wedding cakes and we were doing breakfasts and we were selling bread and baked goods out of the wine shop. Yeah, it was so perfect to grow that I was able to grow and grow with it. So that's why I stayed for so long. And then at that point, so the pastry chef is always considered the organizer of a kitchen. So it fell on my shoulders. I had recipes. Whenever a customer asked for a recipe to replicate at home, it would fall on my shoulders. So I'd have to chase the cooks around and go, okay, how do you make the roasted pepper soup? How do you make this dish? And then I already had my recipes. And then after a while, we realized that we had enough recipes that were actually a cookbook. And so that's how my first cookbook, co-written with my husband, who was executive chef, came about in 1999. We took the photos for that cookbook. I wish I had a copy of it with me on film. It was crazy. Oh my God, it was crazy. So you were lucky if you got 4 shots done in a day. You would take a Polaroid to make sure you were happy with everything, but it would be weeks later before you actually saw the photo, and you had to reshoot like a quarter of them. And yeah.
You hear that, kids? Life was not always so simple.
Oh my gosh, we walked uphill both ways to the kitchen. It was crazy.
Barefoot.
Yeah. I'm so appreciative of digital photography now. It's amazing. It's amazing. But I do, something important to note, every photo is the recipe to scale, because something I feel that's very important, filters and manipulation, you can't misrepresent a recipe, because if you're looking at it, yes, I want it to be aspirational, but it has to be the real recipe. I'm not going to double the frosting or use fake food, because this is a cookbook. I'm not selling you hamburgers on a TV commercial. I want you to see this recipe. I want you to make it. And then I want you to look at what you made, and it hopefully looks along the same lines of what I've created for you. So
scale. So when I make, this is how big my cookie should be when I'm finished making it.
Yep.
That's
and the yield
first time.
And the bake time is based on that size. So I go back and forth. I have recipe testers. So to go from my first cookbook to now, this is my 10th. It takes 2 years to write a book. So you have to give it lots of time. You have to either be committed and decide you are 2 years ahead of a trend if you're going to put something trendy in the book, or decide what you're doing has enough legs to last. Because when you start working on it, and then 2 years pass, look at how fast things come and go on social media.
Cupcakes.
Yeah. But cupcakes are ubiquitous now.
They're ubiquitous, but there was a moment in time where it was just cupcake shops, right?
All
Popping up,
cupcakes.
all cupcakes. It was just cupcakes, for sometime in the 2000s.
Exactly. But you won't find a unicorn cake in here, because that's already come and gone.
Was that the super colorful cake thing? And sprinkles. Yeah.
There's the rainbow cake. Yeah. You can do, I mean, you can take my white velvet cake that does involve sprinkles, and you can make it a confetti cake by stirring sprinkles into the batter if you wish, but you don't have to.
It's good without them. I don't need that much crunch in my cake, honestly.
And it depends. Obviously, if it's someone's ninth birthday, more sprinkles are good.
Definitely age appropriate sprinkles. I don't know. My wife's a fan of sprinkles. She's one of those people that puts gummy bears in her chocolate ice cream. You ever met these people? Yeah, super strange to me, but it's like her favorite thing ever. Chocolate ice cream.
She's a texture person.
And gummy bears. Yeah.
And gummy bears. I could kind of see that.
I mean, I've tried it. It's not bad. It's just not something I ever thought of doing. Like, gummy bears, vanilla ice cream, maybe. But
see, I'm a salt sweet person. I'm one. I love the salted caramel, and I'll put, not just because I'm Canadian, but I'll put cooked bacon in a lot of things. Cooked bacon and chocolate chip cookies is pretty remarkable.
Now that I'm thinking about it, there's not as much maple syrup as there could possibly be in here. I know there's a couple. But
it does sneak in.
But
I'm trying to think where, because it's 150 recipes, so there are a lot.
There's a lot going on in here. Hey,
well, give a girl a pandemic, and this what happens.
I mean, you did it. Thanks, pandemic. So saltwater taffy's in here.
Yes.
And a lot of candies that I didn't actually expect to see the candy as much. So what's up with all the candy?
Well, this is actually, I think it's the first book that I've had a separate confections chapter. And I consider it part of the baking world. It's definitely part of the sweet world. And it's got its own set of ingredients, a set of tools and techniques. So I thought for someone who wants to explore candy making, let's not just give you 2 recipes. Let's give you a chapter. And there are the meringue-based ones, there are the chocolate-based ones, and then the caramel. But most involve cooking sugar to some stage. So that's where the saltwater taffy comes in. And something I learned, because I didn't study candy making separately, and I've become friends with some chocolatiers over the years, and so it's just like baking is different than cooking, confections and candy making is different than baking, and so it's a different part of your brain, and I've really learned a lot I think that's been my most recent exploration. And one of the things I learned is corn syrup and glucose syrup are not interchangeable in candy making. They do different things. And saltwater taffy topic for you, Reyshan.
Yes, my mother loves saltwater taffy, so I just need to know. I need to know about the saltwater taffy.
And when I was playing with this recipe, what I wanted to do was combine 2 flavors. So that's why we have the peach and the raspberry sort of spun together. But I thought this is where I really learned the hard lesson. I thought, well, glucose syrup just seems to make candy making more structured, more stable in certain things, and it lends a stability to it. So it doesn't change its texture as it sits over time. So I made my first saltwater taffy recipe using glucose syrup, and I cooked it to 245, just like I do. You should do saltwater taffy. You don't want to cook it too much. Yeah, I made it. It's set up too firmly, and I put it in the corner thinking, well, my husband's not going to find it. He found it, grabbed one, and didn't he break a cap off his tooth because the glucose, even cooked to the same temperature as using the corn syrup, it was set too much, and it was rock saltwater taffy should be tender. And this was definitely not tender. So I felt really bad. So I am very specific in this recipe. Do not use glucose syrup. Use the corn syrup.
You will break a tooth.
Please don't break a tooth. I do not want to get that email from you.
If it shatters, you use the wrong sugar.
Yeah.
So was that by hand? Like just, because taffy is such a pain to work out, right?
Well, it is in a big batch.
In a big batch with small batches.
This is a small batch. And I do, invite, like you even see in the picture, there are 2 sets of hands in there. It's more fun. And you do with you gotta keep stretching and pulling it, but that's the key to getting that nice soft texture, but also the structure at the same time. When you're stretching and pulling it, you're actually working in air. So you watch it go from this sort of almost clear sugar liquid to almost a meringue. It's got a whiteness to it if you don't add the color, when you don't add the color, because you're working in the air, and that's part of the tenderness, so that when you bite into it, it's nice and soft and chewy. And so that first batch, ill-made, probably I didn't stretch it long enough too.
That's what the kids are for. That's what the kids are for. Hey kids, we're making taffy. You guys want to make taffy? Oh boy, we're going to get a little workout and make some. You got to work for your candy. You got to work for your candy.
Yeah, and keeps them busy. No, you put down your phone, pick up the taffy.
Indeed. So how again? Okay, back to just for finishing your story. So you're in the bakery. You've expanded. You're making wedding cakes and everything's going. You've written your first cookbook.
Yep.
And then it gets out. How'd it do?
It did really well. And I think doing the media for promoting that cookbook, that was when the Food Network just started in Canada, which was about 2 years after it started in the US. And so we have rules in Canada where we have to have a certain amount of Canadian content on our specialty channels. And so we produce a lot. We actually produce a lot of programs in Canada, and some that do air in the States. The Big Bake, that's shot by the same company that does Chocolate Showdown. Chocolate Showdown, that airs on CW in the States now. And so we share content back and forth. But early days, they needed to create their own shows, and the network knew they wanted to create a baking show. So they put an open call out to pastry chefs, and no one applied.
Really?
Well, because the network was new at that point. So they actually had to contract a headhunter. And so I was contacted by this headhunter to ask, would I want to consider it? And it was one of those moments where, do I really want to? But you thought, you never know.
Yeah.
Unless you try.
Can't hurt to try.
I always wonder what if. And I never want to be one of those people that sits there and goes, well, what if?
Yeah.
And never having tried it. So I tried it, and it turns out I got picked. And so this was 2002. I had my very first program on the Food Network. It was called Sugar. I don't think you could name a program that anymore. I don't know that would apply. But we did over 150 episodes, and I just baked and baked and baked and baked. And it sold actually internationally very, very well. It didn't get picked up in the States at that time. But then that led to the next round of programs. And I did a series that was about full menu, about cooking locally and seasonally, called Fresh. Yes. And at this point too, I had stepped away from the restaurant, but I had opened up a bakery business. So I ran a bakery on the retail side. That went for about 5 years while I was still back and forth doing TV shows. And then TV shows, all of a sudden, their production value got really fancy. Mm-hmm. And so instead of taping 3 episodes a day, I would have an episode take 1, even 2 days to tape. And so I sold my bakery business to 2 awesome sisters who were doing all the work at that point anyhow.
Good for them.
They carried on the business from there, renamed it, and they did their own thing. And I focused more on television, more cookbooks. And then this is when all of a sudden social media started coming out. And then content could be used in multiple ways, and I could reach people through different ways. And then ultimately that carried on for a number of years. And now for me, my instructional conversation continues on YouTube. So I have a YouTube channel, so you can find my older content. And then I'm doing live streams and baking and doing fresh content. And I'm traveling more these days. So combining the two, sharing what I taste abroad, bringing it back here. So this is now where you see me as my studio kitchen in the back of the house, back of where we live, which was built over the last 3 years, because if you wanted to keep sharing, you had to find a way to do it. So here we are. Ta-da!
Ta-da! And now you get to work from home.
And now I get to work from home. I kind of was working from home for the past, I'd say, well, after I sold the bakery, I had a home office, but now I have a home studio, which I absolutely adore.
Yes, because you look fantastic. If anybody's watching the video of this, this is literally her husband took the time. He's a chef as well, but also was he always a techie too, or did he just learn the tech in order to like help you out at home?
He loves getting obsessed about a project. And so tech has been his obsession. His other side obsession is collecting vintage deli slicers and refurbishing them. And our basement looks a little murdery because we've got about 15 different slicers, but they're like cars. So he gets them powder coated with like car finishes. So it's food grade. It won't chip.
Right. It's usually rusted too, like coming in all rusted.
He refinishes them, and he has a guy who pulls them apart and then rebuilds them if the motor needs replacing, if it's a motor base. But he's got those flywheel beauties. So like cars, like everybody kind of gravitates towards a different style. But he custom designs them he can custom color for a restaurant. So it can sit on their bar, but they're working.
Be a centerpiece.
Yeah, but the old models, he won't buy them after 1968 because after that it went to aluminum and plastic parts, and they're just not worth what they used to be. So they're harder and harder to find now. Like everything else, now it's just all disposable. It is a little bit.
You remember
these are beauties. He's focused. He still does that, but his attention is focusing on the tech and this side.
Plans his cameras, even has a switcher up there, guys. Like
so when we do our food, when we do our food videos,
is there an overhead above you? Is there? If you look up, is there a camera?
Yep, there's an overhead.
All right.
Yep, right there over the island, and then we've got the stove cam, which we drop in under here. So if I'm working stovetop, you don't miss a shot. And then, so they're all static. And then he runs a B cam, which is just beside and then that he can move, so he can zoom in on action. Or we call it the chocolate cam. So anytime I'm doing chocolate, you need to see something close up. We zoom in really tightly on the chocolate.
I like it. He's doing a great job. Way to set it up, bud. I know he's not in the room anymore, but maybe you'll hear it later.
He might.
Awesome. So this is out now?
Yeah, Baking Wisdom is newly out, and it's 450 pages, 150 recipes. It weighs 5 pounds.
Yeah.
I weighed it. So you can burn calories while you are browsing the book.
I mean, particularly because you're going to eat all these confections. You got to get your workout in first.
Exactly.
Funny story. When the book arrived, my wife had gotten the mail. And so she picked up the box and was just like, what in the world? What did you order? I was like, I don't think I ordered anything. she's like, oh, hold on. I think it's a book. It's just like, oh my goodness, this is literally the biggest, heaviest baking book that I own now. And I don't need any of the other ones because this is the best.
Well, thank you very much. That's awesome. You'll find each recipe has references. We call them bites of wisdom because your wife has probably discovered this. The front of the book has all those tips. So if you're having a moment and you're in the middle of the recipe saying, oh my gosh, I think I overwhipped the egg whites. Or how do I know if I've got medium peak versus a soft peak? It's at the front of the book. And that's why we put 2 bookmarks. The ribbons are in there so that you can go mark that reference point, but not lose your spot where you are in the recipe.
Man, you really thought this book through in such a detailed way that I don't think I've ever experienced. I've never seen scale photos in a cookbook before that I'm aware of.
Awesome.
And the ribbon? Yeah, I didn't even notice the ribbon until you just said that, but yeah, it's got a ribbon.
It's got a ribbon, lots of how-to photos.
Two of them, so you can keep 2 important spots.
Yeah,
so your recipe and then the tips, so you can go back and forth.
Yeah, and basically, when we take the photos for the book, my photographer lives in Vancouver, so she flies in and basically lives here for a week, And then, so she's here all day. We've got her captive. So she just takes pictures as we're baking. So that's why you see so many step-by-step, because she's just here. And she's amazing. Away. Janice she's magical when it comes to light. She just has her camera. We have no artificial lights. She can just manipulate daylight. She's a light whisperer, and she can make a photo look like it's Saturday morning, or it's a Tuesday evening, or it's a formal occasion or casual. So she just shoots while I'm cooking. And we just, oh my gosh, we had thousands of photos to go through by the time we're done. But so many of them made it into the book, which is great. Because when I did that first photo on film, you had to print color photos pages separately from the text. We were allowed 16 color photos to represent the entire book. And that was the way for my first 3 or 4 books. Then finally printing allowed for, color and text on one page with a budget to match. It was about budgets. And so now
Photoshop came out and they were like, okay, we can just hit print now. Yeah. It's fine.
So now we're allowed tons of step-by-step photos on every page. Yeah. And so we thought, with baking, you want that. Because what I don't want is that little bit of doubt in the back of your mind. Is like, should this be like this? But then the reference is there. He's like, it's okay. It looks the same in the photo. Or if it's not, sometimes I used to write recipe notes it'd be at the bottom of the recipe or off to the side of the page, where when you flip through a method, you'll see in a different color those tips. And those are those tips that are in that moment. So when you're making the cake batter, there's a cake tip. Yeah. Okay, you're wondering if the batter should be thick? Yes, it should be. And if it isn't, this is what you do to fix it. And then that follows chronologically where you are in the recipe, those little bits of guidance.
Brilliant, my dear. You have innovated. And I didn't even think about technology in books, because we think of books as just, they've been around forever and
old school,
right? And how can you make a written word tech book with pictures into technology? And I think you did it.
There it is. We tried anyhow.
Well,
it feels good. It feels good.
It does.
I love it. Out of all the things I get to do, because I'm still, I'm actively on social media with my YouTube channel. I still do the network programs like Chocolate Showdown. I tape series. We're taping when we travel now. But writing books, that's my heart. That's my favorite thing to do. And I love it because even though it takes 2 years, every part of the process is different. And so there's the writing and development. There's talking with my recipe testers when I relinquish the recipes. There's the photo process, the editing. The value of a good editor cannot be understated. You've got this,
massive.
I've never met my editor. She lives out west. But we have this relationship on the page because we're having this whole dialogue on the side of the copy going back and forth. And she has to earn my trust and I have to earn hers. But once you have it, it is there. And it is so important.
Indeed. You guys should definitely get dinner sometime.
We should. I know. Actually, I'll be heading out west in June. So I think I think we need to have dinner. She definitely, I need to buy her dinner at the very least. And probably some really good wine.
Definitely share a glass of wine. She's a very important asset to your creative process. And then you get to see it out in the world and you get to hear from other people and it becomes a whole thing. Like your labor of love becomes a part of other people's lives.
And I just want to invite dialogue and conversation and you don't have to have ever baked in your life and you can find the beginning of an adventure right here. You could be an experienced baker and hopefully find a new approach, a new way of looking at things. And you don't have to agree with everything I propose. What I want though is from any level of baker or someone interested is just curiosity.
A desire to learn and explore.
Exactly. And that should never, if I ever feel like I know everything in baking, I should just stop.
Because then you're not learning anymore and your journey's over.
And who am I to like? Yeah, it's a constant exploration and
constant journey. The journey goes on.
Exactly.
So, do you have any idea what's next then, or are we still bathing in the light of this beautiful book here?
Oh, there's no glory basking. No, I'm already into the next book.
Already in. Moving on.
Yeah, already in, and it's going to be a full menu. So cooking, and it's going to. I can't reveal too much, but it will be full menu. Of course, there will be baking involved, but it's low key. And this book wasn't intended to be 150 recipes. It just kept growing and growing, and so the publisher did tell me to please stop when we hit 100. Stop. So I've been given that hard,
It's good to have boundaries. Small. It's good to have boundaries. So where can we follow you? Where can we get this book and learn so much more about Anna Olson?
Well, you can find the book at your favorite bookseller, online or in store. So it's available. I mean, if you're going big with Amazon, it's on Amazon. Or if you like supporting a local bookseller, I invite you to go. If they don't carry it, you can ask them and then they can bring it in. It is published by Appetite, which is an imprint of Penguin Random House. And so it's readily available everywhere. And my handle is at Chef Anna Olson on all the major social platforms. And my YouTube channel is called Oh Yum.
Oh, yum. I love it. All those links are in the description below, too, so you can just go click on them. All right, last question. What are you having for dinner?
Oh, that was the big debate. So my husband picked up, we've got a little country butcher we go to, and he just picks up random, we call them meat surprises. He just comes home with whatever looks good in the counter. So He picked up a London broil.
Oh, classic. 80s.
Yeah, which we haven't cooked in ages. And there's been a whole hot conversation about using, Tastemates probably talked about it, baking soda to tenderize it. And I don't know that I'm that big of it. So we were no, do we want to do it? No, I don't want to do that. But then we both said, when is the last time we've done a teriyaki marinade, which is the best for a London broil?
Which contains baking soda?
No. But we're relying on lots of salt, lots of acidity. And then the sweetness. So we get a good char on the outside because it's, a whole 45 degrees outside here in Southern Niagara. We're going to grill. We're going to fire up the big green egg. And so I think we're going to teriyaki London broil. And I think, I wanted to work on a panzanella salad recipe, but work in complex flavors instead of just tomatoes with the garlic and the basil. In the bread salad, I want to work in some bitterness. So I'll probably char some radicchio and put that in.
On the green egg.
Yeah, on the green egg.
On the green egg.
And so that's dinner.
Man, can I come to your house for dinner?
Sure, come on by. Well, actually, I'd love to come see you down south. That would be lovely.
Okay, we can go have some shrimp and grits.
Oh, please. Yes,
Oysters.
please.
Oysters. All of it.
Yes.
So good.
And some good barbecue down there too.
Yes, actually. We don't do too shabby down here. Not too shabby.
Yep.
I mean,
every region has its specialty. So what would Savannah barbecue, what would the specialty be?
They're real big on ribs, like just straight up ribs and actually chicken. And, and our barbecue, we kind of just pull from everyone around us, so you have like the North Carolina, like mustard based barbecue sauces down here, but as well as like, the more east southern, like sweet barbecues. So we have like a mix of both. So you have different barbecue restaurants that kind of will focus on the different aspects, right? But so it's a really kind of a blend because we're Georgia, we're not known for barbecue like,
you've
like
got
Texas
Brunswick stew
or Mississippi, but we do have Brunswick stew. That is our claim to fame. I never knew what that was until I moved here. But it's not bad. It's not bad. It depends on where you get it. It can be amazing or it can be slop, but it can be found in many places.
Okay, that's cool. Well, my love of sweet tea and cornbread, I think goes back to my spending my younger years in the South. And I love Oh, yeah.
A little
Can't get enough sweet pea and cornbread.
Sweet honey jalapeno cornbread.
Oh, yes, please. More. Yeah.
So good.
Yep. Extra butter.
Well, if you ever come back to visit Georgia, you have to hit me up and we will go grab some cornbread and some Brunswick stew.
Deal. That is a deal. Thank you, Reyshan.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate it. Your book is fantastic, and I can't wait to start making some things. I have to pull out my rowing machine beforehand, but I'm going to get started. Awesome. Well, tell Michael I said have a wonderful day as well, and thank you for being such a wonderful assistant.
Yeah, I sure will. All right. Thank you so much.
Awesome.
You have a great day.
You as well. Everybody go get Anna's new book, Baking Wisdom. It's on shelves now, and all the links are down below, so just go click them, get it, and start your baking journey today. Also, go watch my TV show. Cheers.